Welcome to Parts 3. Today we're going to be looking at how to put everything together, create a part, and turn it into something we can cut. I want to start off at the main screen of Vulcan, and we're going to talk about a couple of concepts here. At the main screen of Vulcan, and now granted, your screen's probably going to look different than mine, but one thing that we're going to have in common, at the very top, this center panel is what we call the tree view. At the very top, it's going to say Vulcan Data. Right below that, there's this little manila envelope with a globe on it, and that is the connection to the database. I've named mine Database Connection just to so we can easily identify it. A lot of people call it Shop, or it might be the name of your shop. Really, you can call it any name that you like, but it's the connection from the Vulcan program to the database. Now, we keep the database separate from the program in case something were to happen and the program gets corrupt. Your data is going to be safe in the database. Once you establish a database connection, you can fill the connection with projects, which is represented here. It looks like a bin with manila folders in it. Once you enter a project, you can fill that project with jobs, which is represented by the manila folders. And then you can fill your jobs with items, which if we look over to the right in the grid, you'll see all the items in this particular job. Now, we give you the freedom to name your projects and your jobs however you see fit, as you can see in my examples. Okay, so you can use alphanumeric names. Now, let's click on Parts. That's going to take us to the Parts screen. It looks a lot alike. We still have the tree view. At the top of the tree, we have Vulcan Data. We have the connection to the database. But instead of the concept of having projects and jobs, we just have the concept of adding categories. Okay, and you can, again, set these up however you see fit. It can be alphanumeric names. You might have a customer that comes to you, and all they give you are DXF files. You can set up a category specifically for that one customer. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to create a new category. At the top, I'm going to select the New Project or Category button. That's going to bring up this category information window. Now, the only thing that we need to add here is the category name. So let's call this WebEx Demo. You can give it a description. That's optional. At this point, we can just go ahead and say OK. We'll extend the list. And in my list, you can now see WebEx Demo. If we look at that, over to the right, in the grid, we have columns for diagram, part, description, cost, and download number. But as you can see, it's blank. So once you've created a category, you can click the New Item or Blank button, and that's going to throw you into the Parts window. The first thing you need to decide when creating a new part is what size is that part going to be. Let's say we're going to make a 25 by 25 square. If you look in the lower left-hand corner, it's going to give you the size of your drawing area. As you can see, it's 20 by 20, and I always recommend to everybody, if you're going to create a part, you want to put your drawing size to be a little larger than the part. So if we're going to make a 25 by 25 square, I would set my drawing size to a 30 by 30. We can do that by going to View, selecting Set Size, and in the Part Size window, on my keyboard, I'm just going to start typing 30, hit Enter. It's going to tab down to the next field, 30, Enter, Enter again. And now, as you can see, there's more grid points out there. And in the lower left corner, under size, it now says 30 by 30. One thing that I am going to do, I'm going to turn off display grid. Last week we went over going into view options. You can choose to display the border and display grid. If you uncheck both of those, your drawing area is going to be blank, kind of like a blank Word document. Now I do want those grid points out there, so I'm going to go to View, select Options, and I'm going to recheck Display Grid. Okay? So I'm hiding my border, essentially. Okay, so we're going to make a 25 by 25 square. The first thing we need to do, I'm going to click my rectangle. I'll type in 25 for my width and 25 for my height. I'll click OK. As you can see, I'm in grid snap. That's fine. I'm just going to come out here and snap to a grid point. I'm then going to choose my circle button. And let's say we're going to give this a 5-inch diameter hole in the very center. Actually, that doesn't really look like it's in the very center. It looks a little skewed. Okay. And let's say we're going to do a couple of different modifications to this. We might add some more holes to it. But let's say we've been working on this for a little while, and it's lunchtime. Anytime you leave your computer, it's a good habit to get into to save your progress, because you never know what's going to happen while you're gone. You could be at lunch and somebody could come by, decide they want to play solitaire, close out of all of your screens, and let's say we've been working on this for a couple hours. All that work's going to be gone. Okay? You could have a power outage. Anything could happen while you're gone. So, like I said, it's always a good habit to get into to save your progress. Now, we have a couple of different ways to do it. I'm going to go to File, and we have Save and Save As. We'll talk about Save As in just a minute, but when I select Save, I'll get this warning. It says, no cut path selected, save anyway. Well, I don't really care because I'm in the middle of creating this part. I've not even gotten to the point where I'm going to set the cut path. So I'm just going to say OK to this warning, and then I'll get this part information window. At this point, all I need to do is give it a part name. And we'll just call this 25 by 25 square. I can optionally give it a part number, description, and a cost, but again, it's not necessary. We will go ahead and give it a part number. And we'll give it a cost. I'll say OK to this. Now, once that window goes away, we can close out of parts. And now, before nothing was showing up on our grid, we have a thumbnail of our progress so far. We've got the part name, the description that I assigned it, the cost that I gave it, and we also have this DL number. Okay, it says it's 356. If we've set the cut path, which we haven't at this point, but if we've set the cut path, we can go out to our controller, tell it we want to download a part. It's going to ask for a DL number. We type in the DL number, and it's going to burn out one of these parts. Now, if you wanted to burn multiple parts, you're going to have to add that to a job, but we're going to go over that in just a little while. Okay, so let's say we've been at lunch, we've come back, we've saved our part, we come back, we open up our screen. All you have to do to get back into the parts program is double-click on the thumbnail. It's going to put you back exactly where you were at. Okay, so again, I cannot stress enough how important it is to save your progress. You know, even if you're not going to be away from your computer, if let's say you've been working on something for 30 minutes or maybe an hour, go ahead and save your progress. Okay, because again, Something could happen if you know, the power just flickered. All that work's going to be gone. Okay, so it's just a good thing to get in the habit of saving your progress. Okay, so let's talk about the Save As function. I like to use the Save As function as kind of like for templates. Okay, so we've got this part right here, and let's say that this is going to be the base for 3 other types of parts. The only thing that those 3 have in common is the perimeter and the placement of this center hole. Okay, so we'll go to Edit, Fillet, and we'll give this a 3-inch radius. Let's say we're going to radius these corners, and that's going to be 1 part. I can go to File. I'm going to select Save As. Now, instead of that part information window that I got last time when I selected Save, I get this parts window. What I need to do at this point is select the category that I want to add this to, which is WebEx Demo. As you can see, here's my other part, the first one that I made. I select the category, and then I'm going to click the Add New Part button. It's telling me that part will be added to WebEx Demo. If that's correct, say OK. Now, it says Save Only Cut Path. I want to save more than just the cut path. I've not even set the cut path. I want to save all these drawing lines in different levels. So I'm going to say No to this. Now it says Save Only Visible Levels. Again, let's say I had set the cut path. Well, I want to save more than just the visible levels. I want to save the cut path as well. So generally for these 2 questions, I tell everybody to go ahead and say no to it, unless there's some special case. Everything that you see on the screen. You can work in multiple levels. We'll go over that in just a little bit. Remind me of that though, because I usually don't go over the visible levels. Okay. Okay. So now, once you've said no to those questions, you'll get the parts information window again. The only thing that you need to remember is to change the name. Okay? So we're going to put 25 by 25 square, and we'll just say rad corner, radius corner. Okay? Again, you do not have to enter a part number, description, or cost, but you can if you like. So we'll say OK to this. We can then close out. And now we have the original file, and now we have the new one where we've radiused the corners. Okay? So again, like I said, I like to use it as a template. So let's go back into the original one, and let's say we're gonna do another one, but this time we'll chamfer the corners. Go to File, Save As, select the category, click Add New Part. Yes, we want to add it to this part. I'm going to say no to both of these questions, and again, remember, all you have to do is change the names. If I can spell. Okay, I'll say OK to this. Okay. So again, that's how I like using the Save As function. Let's go back to the original part. Now, I said that you can go out to your controller and enter the download number, but only if you set the cut path. So let's go ahead and set the cut path. Now, when setting the cut path, you always want to let the program try to figure it out. Okay? So I'm going to go to Cut Path and select Auto Cut. You'll get this confirmation window, auto size, no border. Generally, you want to say yes to this. It would be a very special case to say no to auto size no border because right now we've got our drawing size is 30 by 30. Our part is 25 by 25, which means that there's a 5-inch border around our part. Actually, I guess 2.5-inch border. But there's some space around our part, and whenever you optimize that into the job, it's going to keep that space around your part. Well, if you're familiar with the setup, the shop setup under metal, there's a part spacing. Usually that's set to 1/4 inch, and so you don't need this space, this empty space around your part. So, like I said, generally you want to say yes to auto size no border. Okay, as you see, it's going to bring that to full screen, and now if we look in the lower left-hand corner, the size of our part is 25 by 25. Next, in the AutoCut settings window, it's going to ask you if you use kerf, if your controller uses kerf. That is actually a controller by controller issue, so we'll talk about that in just a little while. I'm going to say OK to this. And as you can see, it's turned my black lines blue. If you're not familiar with what that color means, you can always go to View, select Options, click on the Colors tab, and right now we're working under Cut Sequence Shapes. And as you can see, that blue color is telling us Cutter No Kerf. Okay? Now, after the program figures out the cut path, I always suggest you review that cut path. Make sure that it's going to cut out the way you want it to cut out. Now in this case, we've got a part with a hole in it. So, as a rule of thumb, you want to cut your holes first and your perimeter last. The reason being is, if we were to cut our perimeter first, whenever the part gets cut from the sheet, it's going to detach, and when it drops, it might shift just a little bit, and the placement of our hole might be off a little. Okay, so again, you want to cut your holes first and your perimeter last. Now, I don't know if you were paying attention, but when I drew this, I drew the perimeter first and the hole last. Okay, but that shouldn't matter. So let's go to Cut Path and select Review. Okay, as you can see, it's cutting our hole first and our perimeter last. Once your cut path is successful, all you need to do is go to File and click Save. Okay, now notice when I click Save, nothing happened. I did not get that part information window again. The reason for that is, what it's doing, it's just overwriting the existing file. You've already created that file, you've already saved it, you've given it a name, so now what it's doing, it's just it's adding the cut path to that file, and it's resaving it. Okay? So let's close out of here. Now, in my my WebEx demo job, as you can see, I've just got 3 parts. I want you to keep in mind, the only one that I've set the cut path for is the 25 by 25 square, the first one that we created. Now, like I was saying earlier, we can go out to our controller, tell it we want to download a part. It's going to ask us for a DL number, and it will burn out one at a time. Of these 3, it's only going to burn out download number 356, because that's the only one we set the cut path. If you want to burn out more than one, you'll have to add that to a job. So let's click on the Fittings button, and let's find an empty job here. Okay, once you've got a job, click New Item or Blank, and this blue book is our parts book. I've copied it to my user screen. If you have not, you can go to Special, and the blue book is down at the bottom. If you would like to copy that to your user screen, right-click with your mouse and click the Copy to User Screen option. Okay? All you have to do to go into the book is just double-click on it with your mouse. And as you can see at the top of this panel, it says Part Data. You've got the database connection and all of the categories within parts. This is our WebEx demo category that we created. And once we extend the menu, you can see all of the parts that we've created. Now again, remember, the first one is the only one that we've set the cut path to. So if you have not set the cut path on one, when you select it, you're going to get this error message. It says, part has not been sequenced. All that's telling you is it has no cut path. Go back into parts and set a cut path. It doesn't know what to do with this. Okay? To the program, it's just a bunch of garbage. Okay? Once you've set a cut path, for one thing, you're not going to get the error message. But another thing, it's going to display the part. It's going to give, like a little sample. It's going to give you a preview of what the part's supposed to look like. At this point, you can tell it what type of metal, what gauge. You can give it a quantity. Say we want 15 of them. We'll say OK to this. We can then close out of this window. We'll process our job. Go into Sheet Review. Okay. Now, let's say that you don't have to just burn out parts. Let's say you're going to cut some other, as you can see, we're on 26 galvanized. Let's say you need to cut out some fittings that are also on 26 galvanized. We'll select New Item or Blank, and let's say we're going to enter a square throat, square heel elbow. Maybe we want to burn out 15 of them as well. And, actually I did not check to see if that was on 26 galvanized. That one was. Okay, so everything's on 26 galvanized. We can process our job. Once that's done, we'll go into Sheet Review. As you can see, it's nesting our parts with our fittings. Okay. Okay. Next, what I want to talk about is the concept of adding lead-ins and also kerf. Okay? I guess the first thing we're going to talk about is lead-ins. Let's talk about lead-ins. Let's close out of here. I'm going to bring this part back up. Okay, so we've got this 25 by 25 square. Now, if we were to cut this out, wait. I'm sorry. I was starting to talk about kerf. Lead-ins. Whenever you first fire up your torch, it's got to sit there for a second to initially pierce through the metal. And right there where it pierces through the metal, you've got this big hole, as opposed to as it's traveling along the metal and cutting. That big hole is what we call blowout. So let's say that you were going to cut this circle, and you're going to start, right here about 9 o'clock. Okay? So you're going to have this big blowout hole, and then you're going to have this nice circle, and, and that's fine if you're cutting out fittings, because generally, that blowout hole is going to get rolled up into a seam or a connector, and nobody's ever going to see it. But when you're talking about cutting parts, you want to be a little more precise. You want it to look a little nicer, and you don't want to have a big blowout hole at 9 o'clock on your circle, or in one of the corners of your perimeter. Okay, so in order to correct that, we've added the concept of placing lead-ins. And you can find that under Draw. At the very bottom, we've got lead-in, and when you select that, you can choose either line or arc. As a rule of thumb, if you're leading into a line, choose a line lead-in. If you're leading into an arc or a circle, choose an arc lead-in. So let's look at the line lead-in first. When you select line lead-in, the first thing you need to enter is the length. I've got mine set to 1 for 1 inch, but a lead-in doesn't need to be any more than 1/8 of an inch. Okay? I've just got it set to 1 so we can see it better, because 1/8 of an inch is really small, and I've got glasses on and everything. So I'm just going to keep it at 1. Okay, the next panel is location. Our line lead-in is to cut out the perimeter. Okay, the location is going to be set to the outside. If we were to place it inside the perimeter, it's going to burn into good material, and we don't want to do that. So for our line lead-in, the location is going to be the outside. The next panel is to line. You have endpoint and midpoint. Okay, generally you want to lead in to an endpoint of a line. Okay, the midpoint would be the middle of the line. It would be a very special case for you to to lead into the middle of the line, because you're going to just get a much cleaner cut if you go from the start of the line. Okay. Now we have the option to use lead out. The option's there. I do not suggest you use it. The reason being is, if you were to start, let's say we're going to start up here in the upper left-hand corner. We're gonna lead in. We're going to cut all the way around our blank, and then when we come out here, if we were to use a lead out, we're going to be going over a line that's already been cut. Okay, your plasma torch needs to be grounded at all times, and when you go over that line that's already been cut, it's not going to be grounded. And then when it hits the other side, it's just going to go everywhere, and chances are you're going to make a bigger blowout hole than if you never would have used a lead out in the first place. The option's there because somebody asked us to put it there because they really needed it, so we added it to the program because we thought other people might need it. But again, generally, I do not suggest you use it. Okay, that's my little soapbox speech about lead outs. Okay, the last panel is to circle. You have straight and angled. If for some odd reason you need to go into a line at an angle, you've got the choice to select angle. Like if you were to maybe go in at a midpoint, you don't want to go in at 90 degrees and then turn. So you can select angles, maybe come in at 45 or 22.5 degrees, and then go straight. Okay, I'm just going to leave mine set at straight. So we'll say OK to this, and now I'm going to zoom into this corner here. The lead-in dictates the start and the direction of the cut. Okay, so you need to be very aware of how you place your lead-in line. And that really gets more into kerf, which we'll talk about later. Okay, but let's say for this we want to cut clockwise. Okay, so what I would want to do, I would want to click the top left, or the top line, the left side of the top line. Okay, so my line's going to start here, and it's going to be going in a clockwise direction. Let me hit escape to undo that. Now, if I were to just come up here and just kind of just click in the corner, okay, as you see, it's placing my my lead-in line on the left vertical line, and now I'm going to be going counterclockwise. Okay, you can't just click on the right side of the top line, because again you're going to be going counterclockwise. Okay, so you always want to be aware of how you place those lead-ins, because they will dictate the start and the direction of your cut. Okay, let's talk about arc lead-ins. Let's go to Draw, select Lead-In, and select Arc. Again, the lead-in line doesn't need to be any more than 1/8 of an inch. On this one, as you see, I've got it set to 1/2 inch just so we can see it better. You've got circle angle. Right now, it's set for 90. Imagine this was a clock face. We went over this last week, but 3 o'clock is 0 degrees, 12 o'clock is 90, 9 o'clock is 180, and 6 o'clock is 270 degrees. Okay, so as we can see, my arc lead-in should be placed at 12 o'clock. Again, we have use lead out, but I do not suggest you use it, all for the same reasons we talked about earlier. We have same size circles and all circles. We'll look at these in just a minute. The location panel, we have outside and inside. For this one, we're going to place it on the inside, because if we were to place it outside of the hole, again, it's going to burn good material, and we don't want to do that. So I'll say OK. Now, one thing that we're looking for is for it to be placed at 12 o'clock. It doesn't matter. You don't have to click at 12. You can click anywhere on the circle. It's going to place it at 12 o'clock. So let's add a couple more holes out here. We'll add some 2-inch holes and maybe just some odd size holes. I'm going to delete the arc lead-in that we've placed. Go back to Draw, Lead-In, Arc. This time we're going to say same size circles. And let's change this to 180 degrees, or if we're looking at a clock face, it's going to be 9 o'clock. I'll say OK to that. Now, all I have to do is click on one circle. It's going to go out, and all of the 2-inch diameter circles, which we only have 2 here, it's going to place a lead-in line at 180 degrees. Let me hit Escape to undo that. We'll go back to Draw, Lead-In, Arc, and let's do all circles. We'll say that we want to place it at 0 degrees, or 3 o'clock if we're looking at a clock face. I'll say OK to that. I just have to click on one circle, and it's going to place an arc lead-in at 3 o'clock on all of my circles. Okay, one other little kind of quick thing here. Let's go back to arc lead-in. If we were to leave our radius at 0, let's say this is going to be 270 degrees, or 6 o'clock. We'll say all circles. We'll say OK to that, and I'm just going to click one circle. Now, what it's doing when you leave your radius at 0, it's taking half of the radius. It's dividing the radius in half, and that's what it's using for the length of the lead-in line. Now, again, like I said before, it doesn't need to be any more than 1/8 of an inch. So this could actually wear your torch head down if you use that a lot, especially with big circles or big holes. If you use that a lot, it could wear your head down a little bit. Okay, so let's close out of here. We're not going to save any changes. and let's go back into it. Now let's talk about kerf. Okay? Right now, we've got a 25 by 25 square. If we were to go out and burn this, chances are it's not going to be 25 by 25 because the flame from your torch head actually has a width to it. Now, this is not factual, but let's say that that width is 1/8 of an inch. Okay? That means a 1/16 of an inch to the left-hand side and a 1/16 of an inch to the right-hand side of this center line is being burned away. So instead of having a 25 by 25 square when you're done, you're going to have a 24 7/8 by 24 7/8 square. So in order to combat that, we've added the concept of adding kerf. Really, all kerf is just you're offsetting your torch head. Now, the Vulcan program is set up to use kerf left. That means we're offsetting our torch head a little bit to the left. Now, the reason why we've decided to use kerf left, it's not that it's any better than using kerf right, but whenever you call for help, whenever you call for support, and we don't want you to talk to somebody and they say, oh, use kerf left, and when you use kerf left, you have to follow these rules. You call back 2 weeks later and they say, oh, well, I use kerf right, and you've got to follow these rules. So we've decided as a company to standardize what we tell everybody, and that standard is going to be kerf left. Okay? Now, there's a couple of things. As a rule of thumb, when you use kerf left, you want to cut your holes counterclockwise and your perimeter clockwise. Because if you don't, if you use kerf left and you cut your holes clockwise and your perimeter counterclockwise, you're actually going to magnify your problem. So you're not going to come out with a 25 by 25 square. You're not going to come out with a 24 7/8 by 24 7/8 square. You're actually going to come out with a 24 3/4 by 24 3/4 square. Okay? So again, the program is optimized to use kerf left. When you use kerf left, you want to cut your holes clockwise, and counterclockwise and your perimeter clockwise. Okay, so let's go to cut path and hit review. It's cutting our hole counterclockwise and our perimeter clockwise. Okay, that's because the program's automatically set up to use kerf left. Now, let's go back to cut path, auto cut, and remember that use kerf box. Let's check that. We'll say OK. Now, instead of having black lines or even blue lines, we've got kind of a purplish color. We can go to View, select Options, click the Colors tab, and as you can see, that purplish color is telling us that it's cutter kerf left. Now, not every controller can use kerf. Okay, so if you're not sure if you can use kerf, go back to your controller, maybe go through the menu, and you should see something about kerf. Okay, if it uses kerf. If it doesn't use kerf, you won't see anything. But if you're not sure, maybe go play around with the controller's menu and see if you can find anything that says something about using kerf. Okay. Now, there are 6 different factors that we have to contend with when using kerf. The speed at which you're cutting, the material that you're cutting, the gauge of the material, the torch head life, the condition of the torch head, and also the amperage at which you're cutting. Okay, all 6 of those factors play in using kerf. So earlier when I said that the kerf amount, let's say it was 1/8 of an inch, that is a fictitious number. Okay, I cannot give you one number that will blanketly say this is what kerf needs to be set to, because of all 6 of those factors. The Vulcan program only knows half of the equation. We know, and that's, if it's programmed right, and you can always change that at your controller. We know the speed, the material, and the gauge. We have no idea about the life and the condition of the torch head, nor the amperage at which you're cutting. Okay? Because of that, the Vulcan program does not specify kerf. It only tells the controller to yes, use kerf, or no, do not use kerf. Kerf is specified at the controller. Okay? I get a lot of people asking me, well, I check kerf, but it's not doing anything. And that's because they haven't gone into their controller. It's either A, the controller doesn't use kerf, or they've not gone into the controller and told it how much to offset the torch head. Okay, so that's done at the controller. Let's see, that is pretty much it for kerf. Give me 1 second. Let me just kind of look over my notes real quick. Okay. The last thing that I want to talk about today is how to... Actually, hold on. I'm sorry. Let me go back to the cut path menu because there's a couple of things here. Manual cut and information. Let's look at the information because I want to talk about how to import a DXF file, and when I do that, we're also going to talk about manual cut. Okay, but this information, this is really kind of a neat tool. You can tell it the cut speed, let's say 350 inches per minute. The rapid speed, that's the speed at which your torch head moves while it's not burning. And then the torch on dwell time. That's the time it's going to take for your torch head to fire up and initially pierce through the metal. Okay, I'll just leave it set to 3 seconds. And then I'm going to hit compute. Okay, so what it's doing here, it's telling me the total cut for this part in the background. It's giving me the total cut distance, the estimated cut time in minutes. As you can see, it's 0.5, so it's going to take about 30 seconds to cut out this one part. And it's going to take 2 torch firings to do it. So let's say that I had to cut out 10 of these. Well, that's telling me it's going to take me about 5 minutes to cut that out. Okay, so that's something that you can use to, if you're trying to figure out how much time it's going to take you to finish up a job, and you've got 10 of these to cut out, well, it's going to be about 5 minutes. Okay, so that's all that's for. Okay, let's talk about importing a DXF file. Let me close out of here. I'm going to select my category. I'm going to click New Item or Blank. It's real easy to import a file. All you need to do is, from the main menu, click File and select Import. You're going to get this open window, and let's see. There's so many different ways that people can give you a file now. They can give it to you on a floppy disk. If that's the case, from this menu, just go to My Computer, and you would select your 3.5-inch floppy. Okay, or they might have it on a CD. Select your CD drive. They might put it on one of those little thumb drives and just give you the thumb drive. Select whatever drive letter that comes up as. A lot of people nowadays are keeping it on their company network, which is where I'm going to go for this. So I'm going to go to this, we call it our X drive, and I've got a folder here for DXF files and Vulcan 6 DXF. Actually, let's go into our part file. because there's something in here that I would dopey right here. Whether it's a DXF or a part, under this Files of Type drop-down menu, you can select DXF or part. Okay, we're actually gonna use a part file, but it's the same as using a DXF file. I'll say OK, and here is dopey. Now, let's go to cut path, and I'm going to select auto cut. Auto size no border. Again, generally you want to say yes to that. We'll say yes, we want to use kerf. I'll say OK to this, and I get this error: cannot cut sequence part. Now there can be all kinds of reasons why. Let's go into magnify. On dopey, I can tell you why. As you can see, we've got lines that are overlapping each other all over the place, and the program knows not to do that because it doesn't want to burn out that torch head. It doesn't want to blow it out. So, so we programmed it to not allow us to do this. Now, if you don't care and you just really want to do it, you can always use manual cut. Go to cut path and select manual cut, and you'll get this confirmation window. It says automatically continue cut path after selection. We're going to say no to this just so I can show you what it does. Now, when you select manual cut, you dictate how to cut. I mean, you dictate where it starts. After it finishes one line, you tell it which line to go to next. It's going to do everything exactly how you tell it to do. Another thing that I want to point out, these three icons up here, these are kerf icons. Usually these are grayed out. But when you select manual cut, it enables those. Okay? Again, by default, it's going to select kerf left. You can choose kerf off, or you can choose kerf right. This is the only place you can choose kerf right, when you go to manual cut. Okay? We're just going to go ahead and keep it at kerf left, though. So let's say we want to start up here. I'm just going to click on this line. As you see, it's got the whole line. After it cuts this line, I want to come down here, and I want to start right here. Now, it didn't get the entire line. It just got it to this point. So let me click again. Let me zoom in, because it's just getting a little bit of the line at a time. It's not automatically selecting the next line. Okay? So let's go back to cut path, manual cut, and now at this confirmation window, when it says automatically continue cut path after selection, this time I'm going to choose yes. We'll zoom in again. And again, I'm going to start up here. It's going to get the entire line right there. I want to start right here. Now, notice it's automatically continuing my selection until it gets to the end of the line. Okay, so that's what that option does. After it's done here, I want it to come up and cut this line. We'll then maybe do his jaw, and we'll do a smile after that. And that is going to be it. Now, I mean, I could keep on going, but I just want to kind of show you how it. Let's go to cut path and review. Like I said, you dictate exactly how it cuts. So let's go to review, and let's make sure that it cuts exactly how we selected. I probably should have set the review speed a little higher. I didn't realize it was so slow. Okay, now it's cutting out his jaw, and then it should go to his smile. So that's exactly how we selected. That's basically it for manual cut. At this point, if we wanted to, we could hit save. But if you were to go out to the table, this is all that it's going to burn. Okay? Okay, that is it for... What's that? I'm using my mouse. Nowadays, there's usually a scroll wheel on the mouse, and all I'm doing, I'm placing my finger on the scroll wheel, and I'm pulling towards myself, and that's going to zoom out. If I push away from myself, it's going to zoom in. And it also depends on where you place the pointer. So if I were to place it in the center of his nose, it's going to zoom into that point. Okay, but if I were to place it, over to the right side of the screen, it's going to zoom out, dragging him to the right. Okay. Okay, let's close out of here. Okay, that is it for parts 3.